Welcome to Growth Hack by Poppy Digital. Tips and tricks to master the algorithms from industry insiders. Now here's your host, Julian Espinoza.
Welcome back to Growth Hack, where we break down marketing channels like Google, Facebook, Instagram, and show them how to make them work for you. Humor causes people to remember information better. Think about your favorite Super Bowl commercial. You probably remember the funny ones. Well, there's a reason for this. But since this podcast isn't dedicated to the psychology of marketing, we will stay away from the why and talk about how to use humor to increase your campaign results. On this episode of Growth Hack, we bring on Lianna Patch. Lianna is a conversion copywriter and a comedian whose greatest dream is to make your customers pause, smile, and click in that order. Welcome, Lianna.
So pumped to be here.
Very excited to have you, and we're going to hit you with a super tough question. You ready?
All right, let's have it.
What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh, I want to say chicken because it's my logo or whatever, but I think in a question of who comes first, it's really about who's the giver in the relationship. So that might vary depending on your chicken and depending on your egg.
And for our listeners, there's a reason we started with this. I listened to an episode with Lianna, and she brought this up. And I think it really sets a tone for this conversation because we're going to be talking about voice messaging and ad copy, landing page copy, and the idea of humor. So coming into the real first question, Lianna, when it comes to messaging, why is the use of humor successful?
At its core, if you are looking to connect with your readers and you're thinking about being funny, then you have to understand what their problems are, how they talk about them, how you can reflect that back to them, and what's funny about that. Humor is just such a universal way to connect with people and show them that you understand. It's very hard to go wrong when you approach copy from wanting to meet your customer where they are.
It's interesting, not going to go too deep into the psychology, but obviously we are marketing and psychology is part of this. I've heard from public speaking, at least, when someone has a level of humor or a joke in a speech, whatever happens next, the audience listens to much closer.
Yep. There have been studies showing that humor boosts information recall. So yeah, whatever you say with a joke or after a joke is going to be remembered at a higher rate than other things you say. It builds trust between people. It reduces anxiety. So if you've ever been in a conversation where it's kind of awkward and everyone's standing around and someone's like, well, this sucks, and everyone laughs, there's that tension release. So if you can use humor to play with people's tension and attention, depending on what goal you have for getting their sales or clicks or whatever, it can be like a scalpel. That's the nerdiest thing I've ever said. Use humor like a scalpel.
So leveraging this into, okay, well, we've talked about that humor can be successful. Our audience loves to hear how it's been successful. So in your career and the campaigns you run, can you talk about some specific examples of how you used humor and how it's leveraged into success?
Yeah. So my favorite types of projects are e-commerce product pages because they tend to have, conversion monitoring really dialed in. So we start with our baseline. We know how the page is converting right now, and then I take a crack at it. And I'll focus on a product page in two ways. I'll rewrite the product specific copy that's usually above the fold, telling the story of the product, who it's for, what it's used, and then how it's used. And then the rest of the page will be that supplemental information that helps people, get to know the brand, understand why they should buy. And that's across all SKUs. So we have two ways of measuring the success of funny copy. And when I work with brands with a lot of SKUs, sometimes I just leave the description itself alone, but I work on that shipping and return policy stuff. So that's a place where people are really nervous. What if it goes wrong? Can I send it back? And by adding a little joke into places like that, especially on product pages, you're showing them hey, people run this company. When you email support, you will get a human person, soon, you'll get an actual reply. So it helps build trust like that. And I've had, I have a great case study from a few years back with a great brand called Manly Bands, where I boosted conversions by 100 to 200% across a few SKUs that we worked on. I've had clients come back and say hey, that product copy that we used across multiple SKUs has boosted conversions across the board. Funny subject lines get better open rates when I'm working with SaaS clients. it's pretty much like everywhere you bring in humor, you tend to get more interest, and interest is good, right?
The funny thing is the first thing I can ever remember where I saw maybe some humor, and I probably seen it before then, but like my working memory would be Moz, M-O-Z, the SEO software company. I think their 404 page had humor on it. And it was just like, I was like, it's just a nice touch, right? It created this idea of like, they're not just a robotic company. And then to your point, over the years, I have seen it I've seen it in shipping policies and return policies. And it's just like, as a consumer, because I am a marketer, but as a consumer, I just felt more at ease during that experience. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So you talked about a really particular example where you saw 100 to 200% increases across the few SKUs that you were working. Can you give us other examples? Was there another campaign that you saw a lot of success with landing page copy, product copy?
Yeah, I'm so bad at checking back in with clients. They're bad at checking back in with me, but here and there, clients will reach out. I wrote for a vacation rental company, so kind of like a timeshare condo thing. And I want to say there was a 383% increase in phone calls from an email series I sent out for them, because it wasn't even like, haha, funny. It was more friendly, warm, jokes about any objections or concerns that the reader might have. And because of that, especially in that space, which tends to be like super corporate and super markety, it stood out, and it told people like, oh, this is the company that I want to rent from. Incredible.
So I'm convinced, our listeners, you better be convinced at this point, that humor makes a lot of sense. And, I ask our listeners, just think about it. When a brand has offered some humor, how did you feel? What did it make you feel? Like, did it make you feel like, oh, I don't want to work with the company? Or did it make you feel at ease? Did it make you feel that they're more approachable? And so just kind of dial into that sentiment and figure that out. And obviously it needs to be relevant. Like, I would imagine like divorce attorneys probably can't be humorous. I mean, I could see them being humorous, but you as a person have to, like, your brand has to carry across that. It can't just be like one little landing page or one email was humorous and the rest is super corporate. It's sort of this idea of committing to that. And maybe why don't you talk about that for a second? Let's go into that context for a second. So as a brand deciding that, hey, we're going to add a little humor. We really appreciate what's going on here. We think this could make sense for us. Do we just put it on one of our product pages? How do we convert our voice over to have this humor element to it?
Yeah, I think so many brands, when they're like, oh, maybe we should be funny, they think of it as like a binary, like we're either funny or we're not. And it's more of a range, right? I like to think of Cards Against Humanity at the far end, like total balls to the wall, nuts, kind of offensive, and then you get like safer, you get like Snickers, Old Spice, those well-known national brands. And then you have DTC brands that are having a lot of fun over here with kind of family-friendly, goofy, wholesome humor that's not going to offend anybody. And so when clients come to me and they say, I want to start experimenting with humor, how do I do it? I think about, where do you have the closest connection with your readers? It's probably an email, because that's still a one-to-one interaction between like the brand or the company and the reader. So that's probably the safest place to start working in a couple jokes, maybe a GIF, maybe a show reference, maybe even a funny email subject line. And then if it seems to work and you're getting positive feedback and you're getting like more reactions, conversions, engagement, whatever your metric is, then you can start to broaden that out and go up the funnel, and maybe even make it to attracting attention with funny ads.
So it doesn't have to be this whole dive into humor. It can be a slow evolution, starting with the egg.
Starting with the egg, yeah. You can start with the egg, sit on the egg for a while, see what comes out.
And this evolution can grow into a full chicken.
Yeah.
It's a starting place. And I do like this idea of email, because you'll know right away from your KPIs on email, just open rates, click-through rates, and then conversions. You'll know if people are converting. So that is really, really interesting. So let's get into the how side of things. What are the ingredients when it comes to making your messaging humorous?
Okay. Same ingredients that work to make your messaging effective when it comes to conversion. So showing users you understand their problems, clearly explaining how your product or service or whatever is going to solve them, and then taking it a step further and thinking like, what's funny about this? Or how do I ally myself with the reader like against this frustration? So one of the safest approaches I can recommend for brands is asking like, what's out there in the world that is funny to us or silly or weird? Like, what's the deal with airplane food is kind of like my go-to Seinfeld thing. It's something that we can all recognize as weird and funny, and we can laugh at it together. But I'm not making fun of you. I'm not making fun of me, even though that's kind of safe too. So it's like safe to laugh at this, and it brings us closer together. Does that answer the question? There's like so many angles that I want to approach this from.
No, totally. I mean, and there's probably lots that you can do with messaging, and there's probably a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Let's tap into this idea of, I think I heard you in a previous show talk about shortcuts or easy edits without having to redo all your messaging. Can you tap into that?
Yeah, people ask me all the time, like, can I sort of edit in the funny? And the answer is yes. And I have a blog post that has like 10 quick and easy punch ups, and some of them involve looking at your sentence structure, making sure that it mirrors the way humans talk. So sometimes we sit down to write and we like write up an essay, a 5-paragraph essay. That's not how humans talk. So add sentence fragments, break things up, add emotion into the copy, use emojis, use GIFs, use like onomatopoeia sounds and sound effects. And then one of my favorite things to do that weirdly I never see people doing is thinking about how can this medium, like whatever I'm writing in or on, if it's an email, if it's a landing page, if it's an ad, and the way that it shows up in the world, how can I sort of play with that? So I wrote a cold email template that I actually dared people to use, like open dare on Twitter. That the subject line was like the coldest email you'll ever get, freezing cold face. And you open it and there's like ASCII, like snowflakes coming down on a landscape. And it's like, brr, it's cold in here. Like, I hope you reply and warm me up. So like, it's just not what you would expect from an email, right? Like, how can you play around with the constraints of what you're writing?
I really want our audience to hear about this. You've got this really interesting perspective, especially I love the history side of things. You've got a course. Can you talk to us about this course that's coming up and that you're priming ready to go with this thing?
Yeah, so I've run one round already, which was so awesome. It's called Conversion Comedy. And basically the course is built on my quote unquote like flagship talk, which is how, why, and where to use to use humor in your marketing. And I was like, there's so much more I want to say here. What if I taught a course about it? So we go through the history of humor in advertising and marketing, do's and don'ts, like learn from brands that have messed up in the past, how to figure out your own brand's sense of humor and how to codify that in a way that other copywriters can use. We look at joke formulas from like late night shows and how to generate humor out of nothing. And then we look at like line level punch ups, punctuation, linguistics, funny numbers. We sort of start broad and dig very deeply into the minutia of like what funny is.
Amazing.
I'm obsessed.
I'm already obsessed with it. This sounds absolutely wonderful. So if you are listening to this or you're watching this, in the show notes, we will have a link to this course. We will also have a link to those shortcuts that she's prepared. And, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really, really want you back at some point.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
All right. Talk to you soon.